Hello, everyone. So, welcome to yet another session of geography. Today, we are going to look at the world population. Since today we're celebrating World Population Day. So, this year's World Population Day is celebrated with the theme embracing the power of um, inclusive data towards a resilient and equitable future for all. Now, what that means is that data has to be representative of the population. Okay, it has to represent various people, regardless of their age, regardless of their gender, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, and so on. That's what we mean by inclusivity. And data has to be resilient in the sense that it has to be rather it has to have that ability to withstand disruptions as we advance in years. Over the years, we've had hurdles in as far as the population is concerned. Uh, in 2020, the world was affected by a pandemic, COVID-19, and that somehow affected planning. It affected a number of things, and that is why we need data that is resilient for such kind of events. So even when we have such kind of events, we're able to use data if it is resilient. So data has to be resilient in order to withstand disruptions that might occur over time. Data also has to be equitable in the sense that it has to be um, just, and it has to be fair to all people, regardless of their age, regardless of their gender, regardless of their ethnicity and religion. People should be able to access data without any form of bias. That's what we mean by equitable. So that's what this year's World Population Day theme is all about. Now, the the population is at the core of humanity. We cannot look at other disciplines. We cannot look at economics. We cannot look at political science. We cannot look at anything without looking at the population. So the population is at the core of humanity. It is the mother of humanity. So with that being said, we're going to look at what the population is, the key concepts that we need to take note of, and we're also going to look at the census, the importance of the census, and other key concepts such as population density, population distribution, population structure, and so on. So we're going to look at the population structures of developing countries such as Zambia, and then we're also going to look at the population structures of the uh, underdeveloped, rather of the developed countries such as Germany and so on. So, what is um, a population? So, in a nutshell, a population can be defined as a collection of things, or a set of things, or animals, or indeed people. But in broader terms, we can look at it in terms of demography, the demography of animals, the demography of rather the population of people, the demography of animal, rather the demography of people, and the collection of animals. So, um, in terms of human geography, we just refer to it as demography. So, demography is the scientific study of the size, the composition, the distribution, and so on of the human population. And we do this by studying the interaction of fertility, mortality, and migration. And hopefully, we're going to look at those in broad detail as we move forward. Okay, so what is the most important concept that we need to take note of in the study of human populations? So the most important concept that I feel is um, the most important thing rather um, that we need to take note of is the census. So the census is worldwide. It's a universal process that involves the collection of data through inventories, through counting of people, counting of properties, and so on. So it is the official counting of people in a country. And recently we had our census in 2022, and the census is usually conducted after 10 years. So we had the census in recent censuses. We had it. We had one in 2010, then we had the latest, which was in 2022. I think the period was disrupted because of COVID-19. Initially we were supposed to have it in 2020, but it was disrupted because of COVID-19, and so we had it in 2022. So so the census is normally conducted by the government, and it's usually conducted in periods of 10 years, because it is a very expensive exercise, as it covers the entire country. It's different from surveys, okay, because surveys only cover a part of the population, but censuses usually involve counting um, the entire neighborhood. So the census enables us to know the number of people that are living in an area. It gives us the information about the age, for instance, sex, race, tribe, nationality, birthplace, education, occupation, marital status, number of children, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so it gives us a snapshot of the composition of a particular population. Okay, and there are many ways of counting people in a given area, some of which uh, 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 I mentioned surveys. We can also have registrations of birth at hospitals and clinics, and they also do register deaths as well. We have registration of marriages at the courts, and at the local councils and so on, and and then we also need to take note of the fact that national registration in Zambia is at the age of 16. Okay. Um, other forms of accounting or registrations are those of pupils and students in schools, in colleges, and so on. Okay. So what is the importance of the census? So primarily, the census gives information to the local government and the central government. And more broadly, is that the census enables us to plan for the provision of education, to plan for the provision of housing, for the provision of health, and other social and economic needs of the people. Okay, so in simpler terms, the census is conducted so that there is good planning in order to provide facilities like hospitals, houses, schools, and so on. Okay, um, the census also enables us, um, in order for us to provide resources, okay, for equitable distribution of resources, so that when you know the number of people that live in Osaka, for instance, or the number of people that live in the Copper Belt, or in Chipata, you are able to distribute resources equally without, um, remember we talked about equitable, in the theme for this year's um, uh, World Population Day, is that when you gather data, that data has to be equitable in the sense that it's in matters like this that it matters the most, that whenever you are distributing resources, you need to look at the equity. Are people receiving the same amount of resources or the same amount of finances in each province? Okay, so for example, when you're looking at the distribution of agricultural materials like fertilizer and seeds, you need to put into account the population of each district and of each province and so on. Okay, so the population can also um, help us to know whether the population is actually increasing. Rather, the census can also help us to know whether the population is increasing or whether it is reducing um, because of such. It is it is possible to plan. Other than that, the population census also helps us to know the number of people in the country that are unemployed, as well as those that are employed. Okay, so other key concepts that we need to take note of is population density. Now, what is population density? Population density is simply the number of people that are living per square kilometer. Okay, and this usually varies from one province to another. So in the case of Zambia, the highest uh, population density is actually in Lusaka. Okay, so and this is because of shanty compounds like Kanyama, Mandevu, Kwami Sisi, and so on. Okay, so because there people are packed uh, in a square kilometer, you would find over 100 people living. Okay, and so it's usually high. Population density is usually high in urban areas as compared to rural areas. Okay, because in rural areas people are sparsely populated because they're looking for bigger farms and so on. So they're usually sparsely populated as compared to urban areas where opportunities are concentrated in one area. Okay, so this population density is measured in terms of the number of people in a given area divided by the square kilometer. Okay, so in the case of Zambia, like I said, Lusaka is the highest in terms of population density, maybe followed by the Copper Belt, and maybe least of those is Muchinga province. Now, what is population distribution? So population distribution is simply the dispersion of the population in space or in a given area. Okay, so this is simply the idea that people are distributed in different places. Okay, some places, of course, are sparsely populated, others are moderately populated, and others are densely populated. Okay, examples of densely populated uh, provinces in Zambia are Lusaka, Livingstone, the Copperbelt, and maybe Chipata. Okay, and then the sparsely populated areas are those in northwestern. Um, we have Muchinga and northern and so on. Now, what is a population structure? Now, a population structure is a subset of a population composition. So a population composition is the makeup of the population in terms of the main elements such as age, such as marital status, place of residence, religion, ethnicity, and so on. But population structure only looks at two factors or two variables, which are age and sex. So to put it in simpler terms, population structure is made up of people of different age groups and sex. Okay, so it comprises babies, boys, girls, adolescents, men, and women. Okay, and this structure is known as the structure of the population. Okay, so population structure is usually shown by diagrams called population pyramids, which we're going to look at. and explain a bit about them as well. And these pyramids show the age, they show the sex, as well as the number of people uh, in a given area. Okay, now we can look at one. So here's a typical example of a population pyramid, and this is a very good example of a population pyramid in a developing country like Zambia. Okay, so a population pyramid in developing countries is usually characterized by a wider base and a very narrow upper part. So to explain this depiction here, the reason as to why we have a wider base here is because developing countries are characterized by a high number of dependents. That is, those people aged between 0 to 14. Okay, so fertility is high in developing countries, and that is why we have more people between the ages of 0 to 14 as compared to those that are aged um, 65 and over, okay, or those that are aged 80 and over, okay. So that is why we have a wider base and um, a narrow upper end. Okay, so again, the reason as to why this upper end is narrow is because of high mortality. Okay, so this can be attributed to a number of factors. It could be because of poor health, um, you know, uh, conditions that we have in the country. You know, we lack proper health services and so on. Okay, and then as you can see, in terms of if when looking at the population aged between 15 and 64, which is the economically active population, we don't have high numbers as well. It tends to be reducing, of course, as you go further, up there. And this is the economically active population. Okay, so usually when calculating the labor force in the country, this is the population that we mainly look at. Okay, those aged between 15 and 64. Okay, so this can also be used in measuring the demographic dividend. Okay, so the demographic dividend is simply accelerated economic growth that is facilitated by a reduction in mortality as well as fertility in a country. Okay, um, uh, basically, in simpler terms, it is simply accelerated economic growth that occurs when there's a reduction in fertility and mortality, and when there's an increase in the number of people aged between 15 to 64. So this is a typical example of a population pyramid for developing countries like Zambia. Okay, so as you can see here, we have many young dependents, those aged between 0 to 14. Okay, that is why we have a wider base, and then we have a very low life expectancy, because a lot of people are dying here. As you can see, the numbers are decreasing. Okay, um, so that is the explanation about this particular type of pyramid. Okay, so of course we have population pyramids for Scandinavian countries and the developed countries. So if you can look at the comparison, so this is a population pyramid for developing countries. This is coming from the DRC. Okay, so you can see here that the reason as to why the pyramid is like this, we have a wider base there. Okay, so here we have rapid population growth because we have more and more young people entering childbearing years. And then here we have slow growth because we have a very narrow base here. The same with um, the Scandinavian countries such as Germany, Sweden, and so on. Okay, so as you can see here, when in comparison, these two are developing countries. I mean, these two are developed countries, the United States and Germany, and DRC is a developing country, and that is why we have a very wider base and a very narrow upper part. Okay, so this is it. This is um, what the world population is all about. Okay, so even as we celebrate World Population Day, we need to keep in mind that the population is at the center of humanity, because everything that we need to do, the planning, um, uh, everything literally that we need to do, um, should be able to consider, or it considers rather, the population. Okay, so we've come to the end of today's presentation. So next time we're going to look at the various indicators of the population, and these indicators will stem from the main uh, demographic variables, which are fertility, mortality, and migration. And we're going to look at the crude death rate, the crude birth rate, migration rates, and so on. So thank you so much, and happy World Population Day.